Most gardeners think worms show up wherever the soil is healthy, and that's the end of the conversation. That assumption quietly wrecks a lot of beds. Worms don't respond to soil health in general. They respond to very specific conditions created by what you put on top of the soil. Get that wrong and you can be adding organic matter for years while worm populations stay flat, nutrient cycling stalls, and roots never see the biology you think you're building. I've watched gardeners pile on mulch, compost, even vermicast, and still end up with compacted, low-activity soil. The problem isn't the lack of organic inputs. It's that different mulches drive completely different worm behaviors, moisture dynamics, and microbial pathways. If you don't track how worms actually move and feed under each mulch type, you're guessing, and guessing shows up in yield. Before we go further, if this channel helps you grow better food instead of just feeling productive in the garden, subscribe now. Everything here is about results you can measure, not advice that sounds good on paper. Let's talk about what actually happens when worms encounter different mulches, because once you see the patterns, you stop wasting seasons. The first thing you need to understand is that worms don't live where mulch is present. They live where decomposition is active and stable. I've tracked worm counts across bare soil wood chips, shredded leaves, straw grass clippings, and mixed compost layers in raised beds, in-ground plots, and even, biologically active hydroponic media. The differences are not subtle. And when I say tracked, I mean lifting mulch weekly, counting visible worms per square foot, noting castings at the surface, and correlating that with soil moisture readings taken 2 inches down. Let's start with wood chips, because honestly, they're the most misunderstood. Fresh wood chips, especially arborist chips with bark and mixed species, do not attract worms immediately. In the first 4 to 6 weeks, worm activity usually drops near the surface. Gardeners panic and think they've killed their soil. But what's actually happening is fungal colonization. Worms don't rush into raw carbon. They wait until fungi soften it. In beds where I applied a 3-inch layer of fresh chips, worm counts near the surface dropped from about 8 per square foot to 2 or 3. But by month 3, after consistent moisture and no disturbance, those numbers jumped to 12 to 15. The worms weren't eating the wood. They were feeding on fungal hyphae bacteria and partially decomposed bark fines. The key mistake people make is disturbing the chips too early or letting them dry out. Dry chips, well, they stall fungal growth and worms never come back. Shredded leaves behave very differently. Leaves are honestly like fast food compared to wood chips. A 2-inch layer of shredded deciduous leaves will usually pull worms to the surface within 10 days if moisture is right. In fall trials, I routinely saw worm counts double under leaf mulch compared to adjacent bare soil. But there's a trade-off. Leaves break down fast, and once they're gone, activity drops unless something replaces them. In a raised bed where I used leaves alone, worm numbers peaked early and then declined by mid-season. In beds where leaves were layered over a thin compost base, about 1/2 inch of mature compost, the activity stayed steady. The compost anchors microbial populations while the leaves provide quick energy. This matters if you're growing heavy feeders like brassicas or tomatoes that need consistent nutrient release. Straw is where advice really goes off the rails. Straw is often recommended as a worm-friendly mulch, but that depends entirely on how it's used. Loose straw applied 4 inches thick tends to repel worms initially. It traps air, sheds water, and creates a dry zone at the soil surface. I've lifted straw mulches that look perfect on top and found dry, lifeless soil underneath. When straw is pre-wetted and applied in thinner layers, 2 inches max, it performs better. Worm activity under properly managed straw is moderate, not explosive. It's a stabilizer, not a driver. So, I use straw when I want to protect soil structure and moisture without pushing decomposition too fast, like around root crops where excess nitrogen can cause issues. Grass clippings are the opposite problem. They attract worms fast, sometimes too fast. A 1-inch layer of fresh clippings can turn anaerobic within days if piled thick or applied wet. Worms rush in, then disappear when oxygen drops. I've seen worm counts spike and then crash, followed by sour smells and root stress in nearby plants. The way grass clippings work best is mixed, not layered. When I incorporate clippings lightly into an existing mulch, never more than 20% of the volume, they act as a nitrogen kick that wakes up biology without suffocating it. Straight grass mats are a rookie mistake that, honestly, even experienced gardeners still make because they underestimate just how fast grass breaks down. Now, let's talk about compost as a surface mulch, because, this is where results really separate. A thin compost layer, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch, consistently produces the highest and most stable worm activity I've measured. Not because worms eat compost directly, but because compost creates an ideal moisture and microbial environment. In beds mulched with compost and then covered lightly with leaves or chips, worm counts stayed high all season. Castings appeared at the surface regularly, which is a strong sign that worms are feeding upward, not hiding deeper to escape conditions. This upward movement matters. It brings nutrients into the root zone instead of locking them deeper in the profile. This same principle applies in hydroponic and hybrid systems, which surprises people. In systems using coco coir or peat-based media with organic inputs, surface mulching with a thin layer of composted material dramatically increased worm survival and activity. Worms won't live in standard hydroponics, but in biologically active systems with drip irrigation and stable moisture, they contribute to nutrient cycling in ways liquid feeds alone can't replicate. Tracking worm activity isn't complicated, but you do have to be consistent. Pick 1 square foot in each bed. Lift the mulch gently once a week at the same time of day. Count visible worms and note castings. Stick your finger into the soil and feel for moisture. Over a month, patterns emerge. You'll see which mulches dry too fast, which stay cold, and which actually support life. One mistake I see even experienced growers make is changing multiple variables at once. They switch mulch, adjust irrigation, and add fertilizers all in the same week. Then they blame worms when things don't respond. If you want real data, change one thing at a time and watch how worms react. They're honestly better indicators than soil tests for short-term biological shifts. The most productive systems I've built all share one trait: layered mulches that decompose at different speeds. There's a fast layer for immediate biology, a slow layer for stability, and of course consistent moisture. Worms thrive in gradients, not uniformity. When you give them that, they really do the work for you. If you found this useful, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who's serious about growing food, not just maintaining beds. The more we focus on practical knowledge that actually shows up in the harvest, the better food we all grow.